This episode is sponsored by Agent CRM. If you're in sales and tired of paying 3, 4, or 5 different companies for your email, CRM, funnels, phone, follow-up automation, check out Agent CRM. It's an all-in-one tool that combines all that you need to reach out, nurture, and close your clients. They've got weekly support calls so you can get up and running in no time. Get a free 14-day trial by going to the link below in the show notes. Hello, everyone. This is Dan with the Intentional Entrepreneur Podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. He is one of the guys that brought you halal guys to Southern California. Now, one of the principals over at Roll 'em Up Taquitos. So, do you want to welcome to the show, Paul Tran?
Hey, Dan. What's up, man? Thank you for having me.
Hey, thank you for hanging out with me today. I know you're very busy, so I do appreciate your time. Before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of franchising and expanding a system, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to what you're doing today?
Yeah. Um, there's a bunch of side stories for everything I say, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I've been in the restaurant business for almost 20 years, stumbled upon it by pure accident, abusing government student loans, and just a bunch of naive overconfidence. We can get into that in the future, but that pretty much allowed me to start my own restaurant. I thankfully was able to have a really busy store that was able to, high sales tends to solve a lot of mistakes and issues. And thankfully, I was able to get bought out after 3 years. But during that time, we got a lot of franchise requests for my restaurant, and I that I didn't know how to do it, and so that also sent me on a side quest to find out how to franchise my restaurant, and that ended up having me run into this company that is called FranceSmart. They're the world's largest franchise development firm. They are kind of like an incubator, like a Y Combinator for like restaurant franchises. And they were responsible for growing brands like Five Guys Burgers when they were only 5 stores. Grew that to over 2,000 stores, and they do about $1 billion in sales. I was pretty much I love that world, and I actually, while trying to learn how to franchise my own restaurant, I asked them like, hey, by the way, I actually want to learn the business. Is there any way that I could learn? And it just so happened that they were hiring, people to meet all of the growth that was happening. And so I actually was able to run that restaurant and learn the business at the same time for during the second year of my restaurant. So I double dipped. And I love the business so much that I ended up working for that company for the next 10 years. And I got firsthand experience on how to grow tiny brands with only 1 to 4 units, little to no brand recognition, not a lot of proof of concept. I enjoyed that early growth phase. And so just spent the next 10 years just doing that, working with small brands. And one of them ended up being the Halal Guys. I helped turn their 5 food carts in the city into a brick-and-mortar store, and became the prototype for all franchising moving forward. I also was responsible for selling about 200 of those stores around the world. And in the process, I had the itch to jump back into franchising, or like entrepreneurship myself. And so I asked the owners if it was okay for me to kind of double dip and again, and not just consult for them, but also be a franchisee. So they approved. I built a team, raised a fund. We have a couple partners with me, and we own 9 stores here in Orange County in Los Angeles. And I left FranceSmart in 2017 after we built our 3rd store because things got really busy. But I realized that people still were like bugging me about helping them with their franchise development, and wanted to hire me for consulting. So I just pretty much run my own stores as well as consult for other brands, and that's also how Roll 'em Up came into the picture as well. And so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Hope that helps.
No, no, that's a great kind of synopsis about your history and experience. And of course, you have a lot of experience with franchising and taking very small systems, so to speak, and helping
No
them multiply.
systems.
No system,
Yeah.
and I use that term very loosely, so to speak.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. And then and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today is like you know how do you take a company from no systems to something like 200 stores, right? It's like obviously it take one step at a time, but if you can briefly, like, because I think like most restaurateurs with very unique concepts, right? They'll get a lot of inquiries about franchising, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
franchising is usually probably like step 10 or step 20 in the
Yeah.
whole particular process of 100 steps. But even before they can engage in attorneys like me with the FTD, and maybe they don't have systems, right? But they're getting inquiries. Let me ask you first about the discipline that a restaurateur must exercise to not only just to say no to someone holding a pile of cash asking their franchise, but it's like really helping them to avoid really putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, great question. And side note, thank you so much for helping me on some franchise stuff along the way over the past few months. I appreciate it. Um, but as far as the discipline needed, I think a lot of times, I mean, when franchisors start getting a ton of requests, um, I usually ask if they are ready to mentally change the DNA of their business because now they're no longer running a restaurant, serving customers, managing a bunch of high school or college kids. The dynamic has changed from that to now you're managing a bunch of entrepreneurs with a lot of savvy and a lot of capital, a lot of ego as well, and it changes. You're now kind of like in the B2B business, and sometimes people aren't aware that the entire DNA of their company changes. So that's one thing I usually tell them, like, just know that you're changing it completely. And not only that, the second thing is, yes, franchising is very sexy. It is a way to raise capital. It is a way to scale. But I usually scare people by saying that, hey, if you want a franchise, you're gonna have to be prepared to spend anywhere from 50 to 100,000. Like, are you willing to spend that much on a maybe? Like, it takes about 6 to 10 months to like get approvals from the FTC, and you're gonna have to, and that 50 to 100 grand is not that doesn't even include having to hire trainers, having to hire people to put systems in place and SOPs, and marketing collateral. You're going to have to hire maybe a salesperson or staff to pretty much support the success. And Yes, actually, my strategy is I actually spend a lot of time talking them out of it
Mhm.
because if after all of my you know scary propositions are have been thought through and they're still around, then they probably are a pretty good candidate for franchising. So yeah, it's not just money, as you know, but yeah, it's just trying to talk them out of it.
Yeah. In those particular discussions, do you ever analyze? And of course, there's no hard and fast numbers, but would you say um, there's a certain amount of maybe corporate stores one maybe should have before they really start seriously thinking about franchising?
Yeah. This is probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but for example, the halal guys, they didn't even have. They they only had the 5 food carts. I actually sold, so that I told you earlier that I helped them with building the brick and mortar prototype. We we actually sold like maybe 20 stores before that even happened.
Hmm.
But that's an exception, right? Because they've been around for 30 years. The brand is way bigger than the number of stores they have, and people are just super excited. They're like in love. It's like a cult following, and so um, early on we sold to entrepreneurs who already were experienced food operators, so they were
Mhm.
okay taking the risk. They were okay with
Mhm.
not having any financial item 19s. To this day they
Mhm.
still don't have item 19, by the way.
Mhm.
And It's just, the savvy food operators, they already like are sitting there looking like, oh, this is how much staff is, this is how much the
Mhm.
food cost probably is. It makes sense. There's no shortage of Middle Eastern Mediterranean concepts that are continuing to thrive, so they would back into it that way and make the investment decision. So
Yeah.
that was an exception. I'd say early on, if you do, I mean, I've worked with brands that only had one store. Some brands only had 4 or 5 stores. If people it takes a certain type of franchisee to be willing to take the risk to
Mhm.
and not have bunch of systems in place yet, and they're excited to be part of the growth, part of
Mhm.
putting systems in place. That's a
Mhm.
different franchisee than someone who's like just looking for a cash flow business, like the the 1000th McDonald's. So
Mhm.
it just requires a different type of DNA. So it just takes a little bit of discernment. So it depends.
Right. Sure. Sure. And in terms of, um, ideal franchisee, right? As in your experience on the franchisor side, what would you say uh, the ideal franchisee? Uh, what characteristics they typically have that franchisors should look for?
Yeah. Well, ideally, early on, the wish list would be experienced food operators. Sorry, my world is restaurants, so I just say
Yeah.
experienced
Yeah.
restaurant operators, but
Uh,
just experienced
uh,
franchisees
mhm.
who have operated, who have been through the ups and downs. They know how to operate at a high level. They are low maintenance because early on,
Mhm.
franchisors are very like cash strapped and resource
Mhm.
and bandwidth strapped. You definitely don't. You want to have 100 stores, but you don't want to have 100 people to have to babysit. Is
Mhm.
the word I like to say. So
Mhm.
if they're very low maintenance because they already have the experience, they have the capital, they're willing to invest in it. That's
Mhm.
definitely ideal. Um, it's okay if you also don't have food experience. If they're very coachable, they have the money
Mhm.
to invest in experienced operators to protect their
Mhm.
investment anyway.
Mhm.
Then that's definitely the ideal as well.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that is the operative word here is ideal because early
Yeah.
on, you're not going to be attracting a lot of the experienced guys. The experienced guys come, it takes a lot of pulling and pushing, and a lot of like maybe by store 20 is when like these food operators like start looking at you because now you're
Yeah.
not seen as risky. So early
Mhm.
on you'll need to be quite flexible, and
Mhm.
just a lot of times your first franchisees are like your biggest fans, are
Mhm.
customers already. They may not
Mhm.
have the experience, but as long as you're adamant about like, hey, you just need to be coachable and follow the system. You need to like check your ego at the door. Like you need to know
Mhm.
that this is following our system, not whatever you feel like. That if that's you, then you just should start your own concept.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of both, unfortunately. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then, you'll kind of get everyone from different walks of life wanting to participate in your system. And like you said, if, you can be choosier once you got your 20th store rather than, you're trying to get your first franchise store out the door and, proof of concept as far as franchising goes, not so much the corporate stores. What would you say are some of maybe the top three mistakes that franchisors make when they're starting this franchising process and they're trying to get to their 20th store?
I only get to choose three.
Yeah.
um, well, I mean, I'm gonna try and make it as like the three most important, but the
Mm,
ones that maybe have struck me recently, or I feel like I'm managing or cautioning lately,
mm,
is yeah, I guess don't be in a rush to accept like your first 1 or 2 franchisees. Um, be more comfortable with saying no than yes. A lot of times, people are tempted by the bright shiny object, which is like, wow, franchising, like, oh my gosh, 1,000 stores, go public, go get acquired, stuff like that. But
mm,
they need to realize that this 25, 30, $50,000 franchise fee is I like to relate it to, like, it doesn't matter how wealthy or how successful you are. If you aren't getting along with your spouse, nothing matters.
Right,
um,
right.
I like this $25,000, $50,000 franchise fee or whatever royalties you could be making. It pales in comparison to a bad relationship.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
a bad franchisee will tank your company. It will prevent other franchises from being sold. Be okay with saying no to this one so that you can say you say yes to the next great franchisee. And
Hmm.
it takes a little bit of wisdom, takes a little bit of practice, takes some fumbling to find the right franchisee. But
Hmm.
just know that I'd say one of the biggest mistakes is just being too excited about the idea of franchising. Sometimes you shouldn't be franchising at all.
Hmm.
Sometimes
Hmm.
it's your DNA is better off just operating corporate stores a la In-N-Out Burger, or staying small and special like the local mom and pop shop that's iconic and it's going to last forever. So yeah, that's one mistake. Um, the second mistake is um, hmm, that's probably like the main mistake. But I'd say another mistake would probably be um, not I guess you're not willing to build a team to support franchise growth. There's a lot of it's funny because a lot of franchise companies like to spend a ton of money on advertising and marketing and try to attract franchisees, but that's probably like 1-2% of the equation. The best leading indicator of a good franchise is whether the existing franchisees are happy, whether they
Hmm.
are building more stores,
Hmm.
and whether they can see doing this for the next 10, 20 years. Nothing else really matters. Like, don't even worry about marketing because that kind of takes care of itself when the franchisee's happy. Because if they're happy, they're going to tell everyone, they're going to raise money, they're going to buy more territory. Like, that's so much easier to manage than spending money on like fancy advertising or marketing. So I just feel like a lot of brands just focus on the wrong thing. So it's just happy franchisees and just an incredible product that just can't be duplicated. Um, if another mistake pops up, I'll let you know. But those two are glaring at me.
Sure. Let's kind of go back to the happy franchisees, right? Because there's you probably heard of this kind of idea. It's like it's cheaper to keep a customer rather than acquire a new customer, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
so, what is it that, how can franchisors like keep them happy, make them, inquire about more territories and more stores, to keep them like coming back for more?
Yeah, I think one of the best things. I think one of the best things an early franchisor should do is commit to communicating with franchisees regularly. It's crazy how many times like I talk to franchisees of brands and they just like the franchisor never contacts us, never communicates with us. We don't know what's going on. And then like I'm looking at the franchise, like I'm talking to the franchisor and they're like, "Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that." I'm like, "You should probably let your franchisees appreciate what you're doing. Otherwise, they think that you're just taking them for their royalties and not giving them
Mhm.
anything in return."
Yeah.
So I think if franchisors simply just communicate on maybe a weekly or even a monthly basis about what's being
Mhm.
worked on, it
Mhm.
it makes franchisees committed, engaged, and excited, and it actually holds the franchisor accountable too. Like
Mhm.
shit, I sorry, am I allowed to cuss? I,
This is not cable. This is not there, so you
okay.
can say whatever you want.
All right, Joe Rogan mode on. No,
Uh-huh.
it makes the franchisor accountable to like, well, oh man,
Mhm.
I gotta communicate with the franchisees. I better be doing something. I better be doing something meaningful,
Mhm.
uh, and also just checking in with franchisees on a regular basis. Not just saying, oh hey, I'm just checking in. Like what are you struggling with? I'm
Mhm.
seeing the sales. Like you're doing great here. What can you improve? Whatever,
Mhm.
but you just got to communicate, and
Mhm.
it's the easiest thing. It's free because you've already you've already paid for it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing you can do. That pretty much opens the door to room for improvement or what franchisees truly need. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, like most, like pretty all systems, it's like, part of the income that a franchisor receives is royalty income, right? And so the more successful a franchisee is, obviously that translates to more revenue, in terms of royalties for the franchisor.
For sure. Earn
Yeah.
it, communicate, earn it.
So, obviously you've been around, in the franchise world a lot, especially in the, food and beverage. What would you say, like, obviously it wouldn't surprise you now, but kind of looking back, it's like, hey, oh, I never thought this would have happened, or this thing existed, until I started participating as a franchisor or the restaurant industry.
hmm What are things that I didn't expect I would be experiencing?
Right, right.
Yeah. Gosh. I feel like nothing surprises me anymore. I guess if anything, I think one of the things is one of the assumptions or how franchises get sold is that you can buy a franchise, put an operator in place, and you can run it absentee, you can run it passively, um, and I've that gets sold, and unfortunately that's very misleading, because no one cares more about your business than yourself, and you don't
Hmm.
necessarily have to be in the store to operate and but you do need to be super plugged in to your business. So for example, like I'm not in the stores operating my halal guys day to day, but I check in with my team often. We have regular performance updates. We all of our video cameras are on our phones,
Hmm.
and all the sales data is at our fingertips. We do listen to feedback, and we you know send it to our managers to let them know that they care. And it's just you just need to give a damn. But the idea that you can buy a franchise and just have it run passively is is a setup for failure for both the franchisor and the franchisee. And it's crazy because a lot of money is being exchanged just for this fake ideal. So I think that's one of my biggest things that I thought it was possible, but it's not truly possible. And if it was possible, why would you leave your business up to chance? That these stores cost six figures, sometimes over a
Hmm.
million dollars. Why would you do
Hmm.
that? So
Are you of the kind of opinion, um, the franchisee has to be a materially participating and an owner operator? Obviously not day to day, but they have to get their fingers in the business, and they can't, like you said, just expect it to be passive and I'm going to put in my money and then walk away.
yeah. I think that I think context is needed. I think
Hmm.
because my world is emerging brands.
Hmm.
Oh, hello. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
I can hear you.
There's a call that came through. Sorry. Um, I think that in my world, which is young, emerging, rapidly growing brands, they need a lot of hand holding. You can't leave that up to chance. However, like maybe if you work with a brand that has like 10,000 stores in place, like maybe a McDonald's, like maybe you can probably,
Hmm.
uh, you know, put something like that similarly like that in place.
Hmm.
But I mean, I still wouldn't feel comfortable with it. Maybe my mind might change over time, but I would rather just hire a really good operator, give them consider giving them an earned performance equity package to
Hmm.
make that no one cares about your business more than you, but the next best thing is an operator that does have equity.
Hmm.
And so I would probably figure out a way to just be generous with someone who can take it over like fully and actively, but I'd still be involved in the business. I'd have to be.
Sure. So I remember at the beginning of our talk here, you when you consult with brands, oftentimes you are talking them out of franchising. So I remember a conversation I had with one of my clients, and we will work on the franchising aspect. But that takes time, right? 6 to 8 months and all the stuff. But they say, oh, we got this, interested quote unquote investor, and then how can we work with them? So I gave him the spiel. It's like, hey, this is the only way you can set it up. So in California, there's a certain way you can structure it without having it to violate, um, franchising and disclosure laws. And so I laid it all out, and you can't do it this way, but if you're going to do it, it has to be structured this particular way. And that was kind of a turnoff for them,
Yeah.
because of the way it was set up. Can you share a little bit about some of the things you do mention or discuss with your consulting clients, really talking them out of doing a franchise system?
Yeah. And it's funny because actually you and I can probably chat about this a little bit more, like more granularly, that in a way, but we'll get to that. But as far as talking them out of it, it's some of the stuff that I've mentioned earlier.
Mm,
Um, and I usually just go down I have a checklist of things that franchisors need to be prepared for.
mm,
And a lot of it just it involves, creating SOPs, hiring a training team to help train the stores, or at least start grooming one of your all-star, employees to meet that level. You're going to need to build a really good marketing and PR team as well. You're going to need to also make sure your logistics are in place as well, like food vendors and suppliers. You're going to need to negotiate, nationwide distribution or regional distribution at least, to
mhm,
where it's competitive and franchisees can make money. You're just going to have to hire all these things, and then usually when I'm done with the list, I'm like, so do you still want to do it? And so, but a lot of times they get stopped at the money and the headaches that
mm,
are required. There
mhm.
are some. Yeah, I mean, and about your example about someone who has an interested investor. Um, I mean, have you ever done? I'm pretty sure you've done like that large franchisee exemptions and stuff
Redemption.
like that. But I mean, those are you're going to have to convince you as their lawyer to, like, it's got to be so compelling that it makes total sense.
Mhm,
But yeah, I mean, sometimes I have done deals where that was a great gateway in, because that helped give them the capital needed to invest in more franchise growth. But that would
mm,
have to be, again, just like we mentioned earlier, like you don't be blinded by a large franchise fee and then you're just going to get stuck with a franchisee for the next 10 years, which is the typical time frame of an agreement. And
mhm.
if you don't treat them right or you violate the agreement somehow, I mean, that's a lawsuit. Like, I don't think you want that to happen. So um, another way I talk them out of it is, like, just keep on focusing on your product, keep focusing on
Mhm,
making your product so good that it can't be duplicated, and um, it can't be ignored. uh,
mhm,
I feel like the franchising will eventually take care of itself. So
mhm,
just focus on that. If I see that there's room for improvement in the operation side or the product offering side, usually I just tell them to focus on that, because trying to entertain one or two franchise interests a year, it's going to be such a huge distraction. Especially if your product and your systems aren't like fully in place yet.
yeah, yeah, and let's kind of talk about systems and SOPs and how important they are, coming from a single store or maybe just a few corporate stores. Now going to you're developing a franchise system. How is important to have those SOPs?
Not important if you don't want to keep growing. um, it's a tough one because I would appreciate a concept that already has their systems in place. However, again, it's also straining on the bandwidth, and it can be a distraction. There's some brands out there that have SOPs and they have systems in place, and like everything is like ideal for franchising, but the leadership sucks or the food sucks, so it doesn't even matter. And then
Yeah.
there's mom and pop shops that don't even know what food costs or cogs are, but somehow they have people banging at their doors wanting to buy a franchise. And that's actually the Halal Guys. Halal
Mm.
Guys has operated for 25 years before they met us. And when we asked them, like, what's your food cost, like the owner's like, what's food costs?
Yeah.
Like, they don't have any systems, and that's okay, because
Yeah.
that's something that can be solved. You can't
Hmm. Hmm.
solve you can't solve a shitty concept. You can't solve like a poor leadership, but you can solve, like, putting systems in place for a very important, meaningful product that people would miss if it didn't exist, or it needs to be shared with the world. So um, I'd say that you don't need systems too bad to get started, but if you
Mhm.
do want to get at scale, like get intentional, a la your
Yeah,
podcast name,
yeah,
you do need systems eventually.
yeah,
Just know that that's something that will need to get worked on.
yeah. Going back to Halal Guys, was that something that you approached them because I know you're based on the West Coast that you knew of their concept and wanted to bring, or did they was that something that they kind of want to reach out to you and wanted they want to expand their territory?
Yeah, so my boss, my CEO at the time, Dan Rowe, he actually approached Halal Guys because he he had a great run with Better Burgers with Five Guys, and
Mhm,
since then he knew that the next big thing was like ethnic flavors and
mhm,
Middle Eastern Mediterranean food because there's no clear leadership at the time, like a
mhm,
market leader. So
mhm.
he he actually pitched them and spent like almost 2 years with them before they decided to be like, okay, let's give it a go. So it was more like us courting them for quite a while for them to feel comfortable because, I mean, they don't need to franchise. Like
Right,
they
right,
already
right.
they probably, yeah, they're just like super wealthy from just their food carts, which is insane.
Mhm,
But we pretty much they wanted to share their food with the world, which was
mhm.
their mission. So that's how we chipped at it until they finally caved in. So
And if you're not following Paul on LinkedIn, he's got some great posts, and I noticed you roll a lot of humor into your humor and sarcasm, which extends from your offline personality. So how do you is that something you were kind of always been that way? Or is that something you kind of had to work with, and now, hey, now I'm intentionally applying these particular techniques into my business?
yeah, thank you for noticing.
Yeah.
I think that I think it took a little bit of time and some life changes because early on, I was pretty like sterile and super professional, and I felt like I had to like behave a certain way. But I feel like after reaching a certain amount of success, like I feel like when you realize you don't need to impress people too much anymore, you get to actually be your true self. And I've always loved humor, and I've always kept the two separate. And it just wasn't until like maybe a few years ago that I realized that like people want a personality. They like to be entertained, and everyone loves to laugh. And when you make people laugh, you pretty much disarm them, and you're able to give them. They're able to listen. I feel like my best clients are ones where I just joke around so much, and after I've listened, like I've made them laugh, and we have a good time. They realize I'm not just one dimensional. Like they're willing to trust my advice more, and they're just become the best clients because they were willing to follow advice. And it actually just goes back to humor. The life change part is I became a dad, and I don't know. I think dad jokes just kicked in. Dad jokes just happens naturally.
You get that
Um,
automatically when
yeah,
the baby's born, right?
yeah,
Yeah, it
yeah,
doesn't kick in.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Right.
But
Right.
no, I just think I also realized that franchise marketing and franchise sales and franchising in general is quite antiquated. It's pretty boring. And so I feel like just putting a little bit of spice and humor into it actually makes it more fun for me, but it actually has made my content stand out. And I can't tell you, like maybe two, three message emails and direct messages a week just with franchise inquiries because they're just like, it's humor, but it's also consistency, right? Like I'm posting
Right.
all the time. So I'm sure that has to do something with the equation. So yeah.
Sure. Hey, thank you again. Hey, we're hanging out with Paul Tran, franchise consultant. Now with the roll 'em up taquitos. Hey, we're kind of towards the end here. If you can maybe offer some parting thoughts about that business owner who is considering franchising, and if there's any parting words that you want to give to them about kind of venturing into this very, very, very long tunnel. Um, and which
Yeah.
you may not get to the end of.
Yes, but the thing about tunnels is there's usually an escape hatch every along the way. But I'd say, I mean, you didn't pay me to say this, but I think talking with you is probably the smartest thing that a business owner can do. because you have such a wealth of knowledge and you've helped countless like of clients. Like why would you try and do all you don't have enough business lifespan to make all the mistakes yourself. And you can, like I mentioned earlier, like, all sorts of ways that you can structure this to where it's successful. So talk to your franchise attorney is probably the most important thing you do, because you can have all these exciting ideas, and then when you realize you can't be done, or it's not done the way that properly, then nothing else matters, right? And the second thing is, um, I'd say that franchise. I think I mentioned this in one of my last talks at the Key Concepts event. 99% of my clients who have become very successful restaurant chains that are franchises that ended up going international, going public, and getting acquired, almost 100% of them, they actually didn't even expect to be franchising. They just wanted to create a product that didn't exist yet. They wanted to share their mission with the world, and they were just incredible at leadership. And it's crazy because on the flip side, almost 100% of the companies that approach me asking for consulting, and they say like, I have systems in place, it's ready for franchise. They think that's what I want to hear. They actually fail most of the time because you
Mm,
focus on the
mm,
wrong thing.
yeah.
If you're a business owner, like focus on, like, I sound like a broken record, but build a product that's so damn good that you create raving fans and potential franchisees. Like if you're a small company with very limited resources, like your lead domino that makes everything easier is just having such an incredible product and
Mm,
making it so profitable that you know you could you don't have to franchise. You can
yeah.
continue building your own stores if you want, and
Yeah.
or if you want, you can franchise, but you have options. Some
Mhm.
people want to get into franchising because they desperately need money. That's already like a recipe for failure, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just focus on that, and I feel like everything else kind of takes care of itself or becomes a lot easier. So
Yeah.
that's my parting
Um,
words.
just really quick, also, you've mentioned this a couple of times, and I think it's worth kind of circling back and emphasizing on leadership, right? Because you can have the SOPs, you can have the people, you can have the money, but if you don't have the leadership in place, then you're that's kind of a recipe for disaster. What would you say are characteristics of good leaders that that could develop a maybe not just a franchise system, but even corporate stores themselves?
I'm so glad you brought this up. I feel like this is like a podcast episode on its own.
Yeah.
And I posted this on X or Twitter or whatever not long ago, because people ask me like, what do you think about concepts or leaderships? I tell people that there's no shortage of cool concepts. There's no shortage of really good food. What makes the difference is actually, and I tell them there's plenty of cool concepts with good food that are also in the graveyard. I mean, there's
Hmm.
no shortage of that. The difference is leadership. Leadership that is actually resilient, that is maniacal about the mission, and you are also a startup enthusiast. You know that a lot of times, a lot of startups fail, and the leadership actually pivots to something else that ends up being like a world changing product. Like Twitter, for example, was a total like pivot, right? And so many other companies were pivots. It's all about the leadership. But as far as what I look for in leadership, it's just, I mean, it's people who are maniacal about the mission, uh, and they they think about it every single day, and they live, breathe, eat, sleep it. They practice what they preach, and also, oh gosh, if you don't mind, I actually posted about it not long ago. Damn it. Maybe I'll give it to you so you can put on the show notes. But
Okay.
yeah, but the leadership is everything. Um, yeah, if you want to have an insurance policy on your concept, then you just focus on leadership. So
Mm. Very good. Hey, thank you again, Paul Tran, hanging out with us. We've got some rapid fire questions before we end it out. And
sure.
so if you could just answer the first thing that pops in your head, that would be the best. All right. You ready?
Oh man, cancel culture might hit me for this
All
one. All right, do it.
right. I neither endorse nor promote anything about this is for educational purposes only. All right. Here we go.
Yeah.
Who do you look up to?
uh, my dad.
Right.
Oh, do I need to explain too?
If you want.
Um, no. Okay, go on.
All right. Okay. I mean, parent is usually pretty common, and so I think that maybe that needs no explanation.
Yes.
What's the best business advice you've ever received?
Um, how funny. The There's this quote that I live by that I love. It's called by W. Clement Stone. It says, "Big doors swing on small hinges." It means that uh, it's all the biggest, most important things that happen or successes aren't because of one or two major things. It's like it's small steps done consistently every single day. Um, yeah, that helps me with paralysis by analysis, and it
Yes.
also just breaks it down into more actionable steps. So,
All right. Very good. Um, what's the best business book you've ever read?
yeah. It's a toss up. One of them is the 4 Hour Work Week. That pretty much changed how I think about everything. And then Rework by Jason Fried and David Hannemeyer Hansen changed everything again.
All
So,
right. Very good.
yeah,
Um, excuse me. We talk about pivoting. Are you familiar with the term 3 feet from gold?
3 feet from gold. I think I know what the concept is, but go for it.
Okay, I'll explain the concept again, just in
Sure.
case. The story goes: the gold prospector buys land and buys all the equipment, everything, digs, and then he gives up and he sells it to the next person, and that person only digs 3 feet before he hits a vein of gold. So, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, how do you know when you might be just 3 feet from gold? How do you know when to pivot in your business?
Ooh, that's a great question. And if this is a rapid fire one, I think you would just continue going at it. Uh, when Gosh, it was it the Simon Sinek is always about going back to why,
Right.
or something that you
Mm-hmm.
believe in so much that it just consumes you, or that's just something that will drive you. But if you give up, to be honest, like maybe you don't deserve the gold, and maybe it just wasn't your calling anyway. Because I think that if your calling was strong enough, or if your calling was true enough, you would continue on, and that's okay
Mm.
if you don't.
All right, very good. Um, you lose everything in your business. The only thing you have is your laptop, your cell phone, and an internet connection. How do you rebuild your business in 30 days?
um, I would call the people that I've done business with and tell them my situation for the sobs for the guilt trip. I'm just kidding. No, I would call them and just say, hey, like I want to rebuild something. Like let's rebuild. Let's since you've trusted me, or since I've done well for you, or I've helped you hit certain goals. I would love to ask to raise a fund and let's build something cool. And so that's a great question, because that actually goes back to like, hey, I hope you're building relationships. I hope you're treating people well.
Mhm. All right, very good. What's the biggest challenge in your business today?
Um, the biggest challenge today is finding good operators.
Mm,
It's funny, like there's no shortage of opportunities, good real estate, people willing to invest capital, but I always think like, do we have the operators for it?
hmm hmm
So
Yeah, those people, good people are hard to find, right?
yeah,
Yep,
systems don't fail, right? People do.
yep,
So
yep.
yeah, yeah.
And then finally, and I got this from you. What's the best thing that's improved your personal life or business life that you spent $100 or less on?
And by the way, I stole that from Tim Ferriss. Um, uh, $100. Dang, I can't believe I can't even answer my own question. Um, it's a. Can I do a monthly subscription that's less than
Yeah,
$100? Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, this is going to hopefully get all the franchisors interested, but my number one is Apollo.io. It
Okay.
is a database of potential franchisees uh, that is compiled using AI.
Hmm.
So you're not going on Google researching 20 different tabs trying to find contact information and scrubbing it for verification, but it's all there already for you. So I just gave away my secret.
It's all about execution anyways.
That's true. That's true.
All right.
And they don't have dad jokes. They don't have dad jokes like me
Dad
anyway.
jokes. Yeah, probably don't get. Yeah, you don't get that. All right. Hey, thank you so much, Paul, for hanging out with us. If we want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Yeah. If hopefully it's on the show notes as well. But my Twitter, my X is Paul T Tran, PaulTran. I'm also on LinkedIn as well that way, and Instagram too. But that's more for personal use if you're interested in my disturbing humor. And my website is paultran.com as well. So if you want to reach out, there's a way to reach out to me there too, and you can also learn more about what I've done and other helpful things.
All right. So, hey, we'll put all those things in the show notes. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
All right.